Southern baked mac and cheese that's perfect for every holiday, barbecue, cookout, you name it. Welcome back, y'all. If you're new here, my name is Lex and I share soulful Southern recipes. If you're already a subscriber, then you know my mac and cheese recipe is tried and true. This one I made just a couple changes, however it still has that same great taste. Now, one of the main differences you'll notice in this new recipe is that we're going to shred our own cheese. We're using 4 different blends and we're going to shred them right on up. If you don't want to use one of the handheld shredders, I definitely recommend this one. You simply just turn that knob and the cheese shreds out perfectly. And I also want to note that we're going to use the coarse setting for the shredder. Now let's go ahead and get into it. For this recipe, I use this brand of cheese. I have a block of the white sharp cheddar. We're going to use an 8-ounce block of medium cheddar right here. And we're also going to use an 8-ounce block of Monterey Jack, and last but not least, an 8-ounce block of mild. Now I cut that in half because it was a 16-ounce block, so we're just going to use 8 ounces of that one. Now if you use my old mac and cheese recipe in the past, you know that it is perfect. Granted, we didn't shred our own cheese, but the quality of the cheese that we used was great. If you don't want to shred your own cheese, I highly recommend getting the Sargento, the 4 cheese blend. It's called 4 State Cheddar. You can find it at basically any grocery store. I typically get mine from Harris Teeter or Publix. Sargento 4 State Cheddar blend. So if you don't want to shred it on your own and still want that great taste, use that one. I would not recommend using any of the other store brand shredded cheeses as they have a lot of wax on them and they might not melt as well on your mac and cheese. So that's just my tip. However, of course, as I say, you do what you want to in your kitchen, because I know either way you're going to make it taste just fine. Now let's get back to it. So I do want to mention that if you want to swap out any of these cheese flavors, you can. Previously, I've swapped out the white cheddar for smoked Gouda and so forth. So if that's what you choose to do it. You pretty much can't go wrong. But here's our cheese. Now for this one, we're going to do 2 different custards. So for the first custard, as you see, we're going to use 2 eggs and some sour cream. Now for the sour cream, we're going to use almost 3/4 cup of sour cream. And don't mind that little plastic sport, y'all. You know I get in this kitchen and get comfortable. But as I was saying, you're going to use close to 3/4 cup of sour cream and beat that in the 2 eggs. If you want it a little bit more firm, you're going to use 3 eggs. Okay, so either way, this is how it should look once it's all combined. We're going to go ahead and sprinkle in just a touch of paprika for some added color. A teaspoon of paprika should work. You're going to go ahead and mix that up, and once it's mixed up, here it is. You're going to go ahead and set that to the side and get ready to mix up our second custard. Now, I know how some people feel, but just trust me on it. We're going to get us some Campbell's cheddar cheese and a cup of heavy whipping cream. All of this combined is just going to make the perfect consistency for your mac and cheese, as well as the perfect flavor. You just got to trust the process. Now, I did not use the entire can. I used about 3/4 of it, so I left a little into the can, mixed it up, and this is how it should look. Now it's time to boil our pasta. You know we're going to add a little chicken bouillon to our water. We're going to use about a tablespoon of that. Add it in there and bring your water to a boil. Now, if you don't have any of that and you want to use salt, just do that. It's fine. I just like to use that for extra flavor. Now, we're using this corkscrew pasta instead of the elbows, which I find to be one of the best pastas for baked mac and cheese. If you haven't tried it, I encourage you to give it a try. Once you add your pasta in there, you're going to go ahead and break it up just for a second and then allow it to boil for about 7 minutes. You honestly don't want to go any longer than 7 minutes as long as it's done, because you don't want it to overcook while you're baking it, because remember, when you put it in the oven, it's going to continue to cook and you don't want your noodles to be mushy. After about 7 minutes, they should look like this. They are perfect, not too soft, perfect consistency. So we're going to go ahead and drain the water off of there completely and do not rinse. Now you're going to remove everything from the heat, so it's just cooling off back there. It is not on the aisle that I boiled the pasta on. It's on a cool aisle. Now, since the pasta is still hot, you're just going to stir that butter in there until it melts. We're using half a stick of butter. Stir it in there until it's completely melted. Now, to cool this off faster, you could also transfer everything into a large bowl. I typically do that, but I'm just trying to Use less dishes today, but you could transfer it to another bowl. However, it's still gonna cool just fine in this pot. So I'm mixing everything together until it melts, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my seasoning. Now, because most of your flavor are gonna come from your cheeses, we're just gonna go salt and pepper, just like my other recipes. Just use a little salt and a little pepper. You know, I've seen people add garlic powder and onion powder and seasoning salt and Tony's and everything you can think of. However, it's honestly best just to use salt and pepper for this recipe. Now we're gonna go in with half of this cheese. So from the 4 blocks that you shredded, you're gonna add half into your pasta. So you're gonna go ahead and add half, and you're gonna save the other half to layer it in your baking dish, as well as sprinkle some on top. So go ahead and mix that in until it's slightly melted. You know, it's not gonna melt completely because your pasta is basically cooling off by now, but just go ahead and mix it up. Then we're gonna prepare to add our custards in there. So we're gonna go ahead and add our first custard, pour it on in there. Then right on top of that, you're going to add your second custard, which was the Campbell's and the heavy cream. Add everything in and mix it well. You want it to be well combined. After it's mixed well, this is what it should look like. Everything is pretty much well combined. Now this is completely optional, but I'm topping it off with a tablespoon of heavy cream. You don't have to do that, but I was looking for a little extra moisture because I'm using this for an event tomorrow. So just mix everything up. Then to a sprayed baking dish, we're just gonna go ahead and add in our macaroni. We're gonna put 1 layer in there, and then we're gonna sprinkle a light layer of cheese on top. So we're gonna add that light layer. We're not gonna use all of that. We're gonna save some for the topping. Just a light layer of cheese, and then we're gonna go ahead and add our remaining macaroni and cheese mixture on top of that. Now we're gonna add our final layer of cheese. Just sprinkle that on top, and you can also sprinkle a little paprika and parsley as well. So you're gonna go ahead and top it loosely with foil and bake it in a 350-degree preheated oven. Bake it loosely covered with foil for 30 minutes, and then uncover it and bake it for an additional 20 minutes. When it's done, it should come out looking just like this. This was perfect, y'all. The flavor, the consistency. Oh, and I also want to mention that you don't want to dig right in. You want to let it set, so allow it to rest for about 45 minutes to an hour if you can wait. If not, it might be a little loose, so let it rest. If you enjoyed the tutorial, I hope that you subscribe, like, leave me some comments below, and I'll see you next time.